It's honestly sad seeing certain Republicans who are so unwilling to answer the most basic question, leading to implosions. We've seen it with J.D. Vance getting asked about the election, and every time he goes, well, what about big tech censorship? Or I think there were problems, but I'm not going to answer the question directly. And today, we have the Georgia Republican Party chairman on CNN with Jim Acosta, and his name is Josh McKoon. And he was very unhappy that Jim Acosta dared to ask about the lies about this election. People already, Republicans preemptively claiming it's going to be stolen. So Acosta's saying, as the Georgia Republican Party chairman, are you standing by these lies? And what ends up happening is this Josh fella who, by the way, right before we clicked record on this segment, producer Jaden went, that guy looks like, I can't even get this out. That guy looks like a microplastic. I don't even know what that means, but it cracked me up. He, Mr. Microplastic, gets really upset that Acosta asks these questions and starts going, I'm going to tell people what your producer told me. What? But here was the lead up to it.
But aren't there...
Actually, before watching any of this, please do click the subscribe button. We have crossed 900,000 subscribers because of you. Thank you so much. And before the election, the goal is to get to 1 million. So if you can help in that effort, I'd appreciate it. Easy, free, simple, makes all the difference. Here we go.
People in your party in Georgia, people like Marjorie Taylor Greene, who are already saying that this upcoming election is being stolen. Do you agree with that?
Look, I believe that we have taken tremendous steps to secure the 2024 election. We have a historic number of lawyers working in our election integrity program. We've had great laws passed by our General Assembly, signed into law by Governor Kemp. We've had good rules put forward by our state elections board, some of which are in place, some of which will continue to litigate into next year. But this election is not going to be 2020. This election is going to be, I believe, an orderly election, and an election that in the end people can have confidence in. If it's a really close election like 2020, which was the closest election in my lifetime, then we'll deal with those issues after Election Day once we see what the results are,
Josh,
and we compile information from our poll watchers.
Here's how former President Donald Trump dealt with the aftermath of the 2020 election. Here is some sound of him speaking with Brad Raffensperger, the Republican Secretary of State, in the days after the 2020 election.
All I want to do is this. I just want to find 11,780 votes, which is one more than we have, because we won the state.
Josh, wasn't it in fact the former president who was trying to pull a fast one in that election?
Absolutely not. What he was talking about in that call were allegations that were made about people that were allowed to vote that should not have been allowed to vote under Georgia law. And again, you know, I'm here to talk about the 2024
Josh, that's
election.
That's not what happened there.
About the 2020 election.
He said in that sound. He said in that soundbite there, Josh. He said he wanted one more vote than what he.
I'm not going to let you
what he needed.
with mischaracterizing what was said on the phone call.
Josh,
what he said on the phone call. Look.
Whoa, Jim. Excuse me, Jim. Don't mischaracterize Trump by quoting him. Don't do that. Don't tell the audience what he said, because that would be characterizing him. I mean, mischaracterizing him.
Look, I mean, we can.
Why did he say that? Why did he say he wanted one more vote than what he needed?
What he said is that he wanted an investigation into the allegations that he had made.
I love that. Find me 11,780 votes. You know how we've been talking about the sane washing that's done by Republicans and how Trump can't articulate his own positions thoughtfully enough or coherently enough or convincingly enough, so then Republicans have to go up and say, no, he was speaking abstractly, as Tim Scott said, or what he really meant was we need an investigation, and if I lose after that investigation, I'll accept the results. Where did you get that from, Josh? Microplastic. None of us saw that story, heard that audio. We did hear when he said, which is one more than we have. What? Oh, Josh. Josh.
about felons voting, about people who had moved out of state voting, about people
Josh,
who had moved out of
no,
county.
that's not what happened. Let's play it one more time, just in case. Maybe the Zoom is off or something. If we can't control them, let's play the sound one more time. Josh, let's listen to it one more time. Josh, let's listen to it one more time.
No, we don't need to hear it again. Shoot. No, please don't do it.
Time.
All I want to do is this. I just want to find 11,780 votes, which is one more than we have, because we won the state.
Yeah, Josh, why did he say that? I just want to find 11,780 votes, which is one more than what we have because we won the state. In that call, he talks about shredding ballots, removing machinery.
Okay, so Josh McKoon was very uncomfortable in answering the question, as you can tell. And so ultimately, when it fails, when the attempt to recharacterize and actually mischaracterize, which is what Josh is doing, the statement of Trump, then you have to fall back on saying this interview is unfair. Just like when Trump gets his rear end handed to him by Kamala Harris, he has to say the debate was unfair. Here, Josh says this interview is unfair. You didn't say you were going to ask me about the 2020 election whenever you sent me the request for this interview.
Well, I appreciate you coming on. You were able to talk about early voting. We were talking about all these issues, and I think as the state party chair, you should be prepared to answer these kinds of questions. Especially when your own party officials say that the vote was secure last time around, but you continue to undermine it. I'm not going to let that fly on this program. I'm very sorry that you continue to do it. But Josh,
I have to say, just Jim Acosta, so beautiful, nailing this. So many mainstream media reporters don't feel like they can tussle with someone this much. I will use that phrase in the future. I love it. I'm so sorry you continued to do that. I'm so sorry you kept acting like a child, so I had to parent you.
Thank you very much for your time.
I'll just post what your producer sent to me, okay? Then we can talk about who's lying.
Josh, next time, you got to be prepared for any and all questions, all right? And you're getting that straight from me.
We'll be
right back.
I'll definitely be prepared for you to talk
right
about something entirely separate from what you said you were going to talk about.
Josh, yes, sir. If you are going to be on this program, obviously you have to answer questions on a variety of subjects, including the assertions that members of your party are making about the upcoming election. I don't understand why that is not rocket science. That just is a given.
And maybe you don't know what your producer is communicating to your guests, but your producer was very clear on the subjects we'll be discussing today.
And did you talk about it?
Very little time talking about. No, not really. I didn't get to talk about all the things that are happening in early voting. The fact that 16% of the people who have voted in this election did not vote in 2020. The low propensity voters that we have been chasing for the last year are turning out. They're turning out in record numbers. That is because the strategy.
And I appreciate you coming on and saying that, but Josh, I appreciate you saying that. But if you're going to come on and undermine people's confidence in the election process in your state and in this country, you have to have an expectation. You have to have a reasonable expectation. You're going to be challenged on that.
I've said repeatedly.
You have to have an expectation that that's going to be challenged.
I've said repeatedly to you this morning that we've got great laws in place, that the election is much more secure than it was in 2020. That's what I've been telling Republican voters all over the state. You need to turn out early. You don't need to worry about election irregularities. You need to show up and vote, because the way we're going to win this election is if we have historic turnout from Republican voters. And that's
I think we can all agree that we want everybody to vote. And we want that participation. We want people to vote. Josh McKoon, thanks for your time.
So it's so pitiful whenever people go on an interview. It starts going away they don't like, so they just attack the host and the structure of the interview. For example, I had a bunch of issues with how the recent Piers Morgan panel was moderated. But during our discussion, I just did my best to make the points that I wanted to make, and I didn't start going, why is the panel like this? Afterwards, if Josh wants to talk about how he feels that Jim Acosta didn't give him advance warning that he was going to talk about this, and that's something that Josh thinks he should have done, then he has every ability to do that, and I wouldn't judge him as aggressively for it, unless he makes dishonest points about it, which he would, so then I would. But you could just make your points, but your argument's weak, so you don't feel comfortable enough making the arguments on air. So you have to, on air, start questioning the structure and the setup, and you tricked me into this. But if you are being brought on as the Georgia Republican Party chairman, and you're coming on, which I guess the producer said, we want to talk about Georgia early vote, it's not outlandish to think as early vote is taking place, one of the questions that at least a good journalist is going to ask is, people are lying about this election. Because he keeps going, and everyone keeps trying to defend the election lies by saying, we don't want to talk about 2020, we want to talk about 2024. Stop looking back, we're looking forward. But it's them who then turns around, just like Josh did, and acts like there may be some things that we're going to have to justify election lies around, my words, not his, once the election happens. What does he mean by that? If Trump loses Georgia. That's what he means. They'll do all of this election integrity work, quote unquote. They'll make the rounds of right-wing media, get celebrated for how we've secured our election. And then if they lose in November, they're all of a sudden going to be like, no, I'm just kidding. We didn't secure it. It's totally bad. And they stole it again. Well, then you're terrible at your job, even by your own standards, Josh. And it's not dishonest. It's not his producer misleading you for Jim Acosta to ask, whenever he's bringing you on to talk about the election, for him then to ask about, you guessed it, the election. Get yourself together, Josh. Let me know what you thought in the comments. Support the show. Get the members only bonus show by clicking that join button below.